We have a need to have more understanding of each other in this world. Would you agree? Today, we're working to bridge that gap by having this conversation about how culture shapes perceptions of mental health. Please stay tuned, have a listen as two licensed therapists, Liana Huseman and Reagan Hovey, have a really helpful and informative conversation about this topic. SAGE is a 501c3 nonprofit organization building community by providing education and counseling about physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. We encourage all of our listeners to find their own path to what holistic wellness means to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liana Huseman with SAGE Wellness Center, and this is...
And I am Reagan Hovey, another one of the therapists at SAGE Holistic Health and Wellness Center.
Awesome. So we are going to be just running a little chat here, and I'm going to be actually logging into our live, our Instagram live as well. So as I'm getting that prepped, Reagan is just going to start us off, and just something very simplistic as to why, Reagan, why do you feel like even talking about culture and mental health is important to you or important for people to hear?
I mean, even just from like the most basic standpoint, even that understanding that in a lot of ways, culture sort of informs how we see ourselves and how we kind of engage with the world, right? In some ways, it's like those unspoken, or I mean, in some instances, actual like spoken rules of this is how it's supposed to be, or this is how it's not supposed to be. And I think obviously for that very reason, it very much influences sort of the way that people conceptualize and think about mental health. It can impact people's expectations about what even interactions within the therapy setting are supposed to look like. But I think it ultimately impacts how we understand health and healing too, because a lot of it has to do with the way that we even conceptualize problems, particularly mental health problems, which are talked about in so many different ways, depending on culture, which has so many different facets to it. I know
yes, we are logged into Instagram Live. So hi, I'm Liana Huseman. I'm with SAGE.
Hello.
I'm going to wait for Reagan to pop on. We're kind of doing this dual Facebook and Instagram Live.
How do I?
So Reagan, do you see? Are we up and running here? Can you see me on Instagram? The SAGE.
I'm on Instagram.
Okay.
But
have you logged or clicked on the live link for Instagram for SAGE?
I think so.
Just sent you one right now. This is our first time. So hi everyone on Instagram. I'm Liana with SAGE. Let's see, we're waiting for, oh, here we go. Reagan to pop on.
I think I sent the request.
Okay, I should be adding you right now.
Okay.
Everyone bear with us. We're getting.
No, right? I'm like, wait a minute, there's like a lag, but then I realized it's because I was, okay. Sorry about that. I think that was something with my own sound that I don't know if I need to turn off.
Is your Instagram on your computer?
No, it's on my phone.
Okay, I'm not hearing it anymore, are you?
No. Are you hearing? I'm not sure why it's making that sound. Maybe I need to, sorry everybody. I wonder if, does that, oh, can you hear anything now?
I'm good now.
Okay. I think I just needed to
yeah, we can get through it. And if not, we'll.
I know, right?
Switch back to the Zoom. So we're on a chat right now, and we're talking about cultural awareness, but just how culture plays a perception into mental health. And Reagan and I thought this would be a great time to just have a little chat about it, right? And so just prefacing that we understand that there's so many different layers to culture and to mental health and how it shapes how we perceive mental health and what it looks like for us, right? In no way are we experts in this topic, but it is something important to talk about, right? And it's something that we feel like there's so many different layers, and then we can go on and on. But for now, we're just going to kind of keep it simple and chat about why it's important to us. Reagan gave us a great insight to like why she feels like it's important to talk about or even bring up. One of the things that I wanted to bring up, Reagan, is just wondering how culture influences the mental health perception. What are your thoughts on how it shapes how we view mental health?
I mean, gosh, in so many ways, the very first thing that typically comes to mind for me is even just looking at cultural stigma, right? And for some cultures, and I can certainly speak to that like personally, not always feeling really like encouraged to go to therapy as the first route of working on mental health concerns, right? Like the stigma is sort of like we deal with that in the family. We don't sort of talk about the inner workings of what's going on within the family outside of the family. And I think so for me, that's certainly impacted the perception of mental health in general. But I wonder for you, because I know that that's like a big component of something that you speak to pretty eloquently, pretty often.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you know, just speaking from personal experience, I think the best thing to do is just to get real with it, right? Like I come from a traditional Mexican American background. Yes, I don't look it, but that's where it stems from. And for me, I was raised with the perception that you deal with everything in the home, right? You bring it to another person. It's private, it's sacred. It's something that you maybe even barely talk about, right, with your family. And I kept a lot of those secrets for a really long time. Like, and they became secrets in myself. And it's like, I felt a certain way, or I didn't know how to get through something, but to talk about it with somebody else was like, whoa. And then to talk to a professional about it, something's wrong with you then.
Yes, right? If you can't handle this yourself.
Something is wrong with you. So if you acknowledged it, or if I acknowledged it, then it meant that maybe I was, and here's the word, I was weak. That word is such a triggering word for me, because who wants to be weak, right? Who wants to be thought of as I can do it? And for me, it's like you do. And especially the women in our family, you're doers. You get up and you do. There's no time to sit there and wallow or to feel sorry for yourself. And even hear the words I'm saying, right? It's demoralizing. Like, don't feel sorry for yourself. You're not worthy enough to be put on a platform or have someone in front of you to tell you it's going to be okay. Or, hey, you ever thought of this perception, or you ever thought of it this way, right? To give me more insight. So it felt at some point, and especially into adulthood, like I was kind of running in circles at some point, right? Like I wasn't getting the full Monty of life, where I created patterns for myself and I only thought one way, until one day I gave myself permission. I gave myself permission to speak. I gave myself permission to say, hey, I'm not okay today, or I don't feel okay today, or I'm having these thoughts. Are they healthy thoughts? Are they unhealthy thoughts? And I really didn't know the answer. So can you imagine what that might feel like for many people, like not knowing if your thoughts are the healthiest thoughts for you? If maybe there's a different way to do this. So how my culture has impacted me was to stay silent. Silence was golden, right? Just stay silent. And, I run into fellow friends, colleagues, and now my clients, I share that perception with them. And it's one of the most freeing moments to realize that you can move in a different direction, but your culture, my culture, is so important to me that I felt like I was going against it. in some way. And I'm wondering if maybe you felt that way in your experience, like you were not either obeying or you were going against the grain, and there were some painful feelings with that. There was embarrassment, and a lot of those feelings kept me from reaching out to someone to just help me to process what I was feeling so that I didn't feel alone and that I wasn't running in circles or like I was on that hamster wheel. I don't know, I just spit out a lot at you right now.
No, but I mean, so like, much of that, I absolutely connect to that in the sense of, right, very sort of similar, not the same culture, but very, like, I come from the South, big family, very tight knit. And it was similar in that regard of like, we handle things on our own. But I think that it certainly did persist as this belief of, what would it mean if I was to go outside of the family to engage in something beyond just like our usual, we talk about it and we handle it here. And I think for myself, it was sort of that feeling of, well, what does healing look like for me, in the context of still honoring my family, but recognizing that there's limits on that. And that at times, like I just needed the additional help, but it's like, it did feel like this, it had to be an either or, like it had to be one or the other. And to engage in one almost felt like it was then like disavowing or dishonoring the other. And for me, at least, that sort of took some time to even, work out on my own, but then also find somebody who was willing to honor that too, that I came in with reservations and that I came in pretty guarded. I mean, when I say pretty guarded, I mean very guarded, like, how much do I want to talk about? And then just finding that connection to somebody who sort of honored that and allowed me to go at my own pace. And it wasn't like, oh, you need to go deeper immediately. That played a very big role in my, like, I guess the rapport building, but also sort of my comfortability with feeling inclined towards like, oh, this doesn't have to be a this or a that choice. I can honor both things, which, like you're saying, it is that very freeing experience.
What you just said, I had a thought, and like a thought bubble of culture. I mean, what is culture, right? So some people might only think of it as ethnicity, right? Cultural background.
Mm-hmm.
It can mean so many different things. It can look like so many different aspects of your life. I think just even asking your client, what is your, being curious, what does your culture look like? How do you describe it? How do you connect with it? Even branching that out to your friends and family. What is culture for you? And what is important about it for me to understand? That's something that I ask my clients all the time, because to me, that creates safety, right? Safety in the therapeutic room when, like you said, you have reservations. I'm thinking about my own experiences. I've had a few therapists in my life, and some not so safe for me. And when I say safe, I don't mean like I didn't feel physically safe. I didn't feel emotionally safe. And so you speaking to culture, let's even talk about what is American culture. How has American culture shaped how we view mental health? I mean, before I got into our field, before I knew this was an option for me, it was that whole, you go into a room and someone asks you, how do you feel? I didn't know how I felt. I didn't even know how to say, I feel sad. I feel disappointed. I feel not the best feelings. Someone that I think we've talked about, a book we've read, Untamed by Glennon Doyle, she, right?
I can't help it. Just every time, so good. If you haven't read it.
She has that quote in her book where she went to a meeting, right? For just a meeting, right? Talking about stuff that she was struggling with. And someone pulled her aside after she spoke on her feelings and said, hey, we have feelings and we're supposed to feel all of them, not just happiness. And when I was reading her passage in her book about her experience on feelings, I went, that's what I thought. I thought if you didn't feel happy or something positive, then you weren't supposed to feel those feelings. You were supposed to find a solution. You were supposed to fix it. You're supposed to run from it. You're supposed to just push it out. And now when I through the therapeutic setting where someone said, hey, you can cry, you can feel what you feel, we just have to learn how to, navigate it in a healthy way so that it serves you in your life, in your friendships, in your relationships, whether it's your relationship with self or others. And so what is US culture? What is American culture? How has that shaped us? And then how are we meshing that with our culture at home? There's so many different layers that just compound over time. And it's not an easy concept to, I think, understand, navigate. So I think it's very important as someone walks into our room or into our space. My space is Zoom right now, right? Telehealth. And to say, who are you? What is your culture? What do you believe in? What do you not believe in? How can you help me understand you so that we can work together and so that I can see you for you and that you don't have this expectation of me thinking of you a certain way, right? So that's kind of cultivating that safetiness. And then also with that, how do you think culture shapes how we express our symptoms? Whether those symptoms are how we feel internally, emotionally, physically, like how do you think culture shapes how we speak in session or just even in our everyday conversations?
I mean, God, I feel like you just said so many important things that I want to I felt, that like internal pull to be like, yes, that. The first of which, I love that question that you posed right around like, what do you feel like is important for me to know about your culture? Like what, just that open-endedness, but also just like giving them the space to even speak to the diversity that each person even can experience within a culture, right? There's just because a person is kind of identifies with one particular culture, right? I think, and you're speaking to that beautifully in terms of like the nuance that can even present itself, because there's even different like subsets of culture within that culture, right? Like I can identify as one thing, but then there's other sort of pieces that fall under that umbrella as well. But I think the secondary piece that I heard you speaking to too was like our Western culture, which is in a lot of ways propped up by, this system of like Western medicine, which in so many ways, which I mean, I thought of that when you were talking about, this feeling of, how do I fix it? Like, how do I fix my feelings? Because if you look at like Western medicine, right, it's sort of like, here's the problem, here's the solution, this is how you figure it out. And I think even just that shifting away from problem or emotions to be seen as like a problem to be solved, and rather like normalizing them as like, that's the part of the human experience, is to emote a range of things, not just one thing. But then to that end, I think even that, on top of a multitude of other things, really does impact the way that we conceptualize or talk about or define the problems that we're facing. Because if you grew up in a culture where emotions weren't really like talked about too much, I mean, we talked about it like to a degree, to an extent, but I would say typically, I was more comfortable talking about just like physical symptoms, even like I feel tired. I feel restless, rather than saying like, I think I'm depressed. Like that felt scary to go there.
Yeah.
And I think that
even to say, I feel symptoms of depression. What does your culture say about those who are dealing with symptoms of depression? If it's not accepted, then how can you verbalize it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is so important, to say, I'm speaking to the physical because that's what I know. And as a therapist, it's our job to understand, okay, this is a layer of what you feel. Maybe we can help work on what it feels like emotionally. And that's mind blowing to so many people, including myself. Like I didn't know that it interlinked, and it does. So even the idea that someone might say, oh, well, after listening to our chat, maybe therapy is not for me because I don't know how to speak to my emotions. Absolutely not. It's for everyone. And it's just a tool, right? It's a tool. I mean, when you heard the word therapist growing up, what came to mind for you?
I feel like it was this very like a prototypical like imagining of, number one, something that rich people do. Number two, just somebody lying on a couch and someone else sort of listening. I mean, it was very, it's hard. I can't even really, that's even like my own like adult version of what I think my childhood version thought of it. Cause I don't even know that I knew really what a therapist was or what it did, because it just wasn't part of like our everyday conversations. Even in my family, it wasn't like, oh yeah, therapist, and that's what like therapists do. It's like, well, I like, there wasn't a lot of context for me till I get older. And then we had like guidance classes in school. And then even with that, it was sort of this association of kind of something to do with emotions, but still even in a lot of ways it was shrouded in mystery. And I wonder for you kind of like what your perception or your view of it was.
It was this.
The emoji.
I don't even know if I heard the word therapist until much later, but I think it was Shrink was what I grew up with. I think we watched a lot of 90s movies, right? Like the kids get the Shrink, you know, it was negative. It was this idea that, again, that if he needed professional help, and even till this day, sometimes I'll fully admit this, I don't like being referred to as a therapist.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't, because the stigma still exists in our culture, in Western culture, in Mexican culture, in all the, you know, even think religious, right? Religious culture, certain practices, it's not welcomed. It's viewed as very negatively, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm just your friendly, you know, neighbor, and I'm trained to listen. This is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
What I've learned in culture is that I wasn't taught or trained to listen, right? I might hear you. I can hear the words you're saying, but do I know how to listen?
Mm-hmm.
Am I listening to what you're saying? Most people don't. And it's not by their own fault. It's something that wasn't introduced. Look at school from kindergarten to 12th grade. I don't remember any class that I was enrolled in that said, hey, this is how we learn to listen, right?
Yeah.
Most people are hearing you and ready to respond, right? Also, that's not a negative, that's human emotion. Emotion arises. There's times where I can definitely, you know, have a conversation with someone that's emotionally driven and I can hear and I can listen. But if I'm being triggered by something, an emotion, I might not be able to listen as well as I could have, right? I'm human. It happens. It's something inside me. But at some point, when do you realize, hey, I'm having an emotional trigger and I don't even know if it's about this person. Maybe I need to take a step back, right? That's simple tools. But Western culture for me, my personal culture, spirituality, all that, it didn't help me to get to obtain these tools. And so it shaped how I viewed therapy as a waste of time.
Absolutely.
I can out on my own.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for years, but have I?
Yeah.
Have I been doing it?
I know. Well, and even in hearing you say that, it makes me think about my elementary school experience of, remember even like the guidance counselor in my mind it was this association with, you only go there if you're in trouble. It wasn't like, oh, this is somewhere. And I think for some people, that's even at this point in time, the belief about therapy, like you only go if your life is falling apart or if something is deeply wrong with you or something along those lines. When in fact, I mean, of course, I'll admit this bias of my own, this I guess is a cultural bias, right? Because I am a therapist. I'm like, truly, I think everybody should be in therapy. It doesn't have to be something that you pursue when things are falling apart. It can also just be when things are going well, or just wanting to sort of like do more reflective, deep diving work.
Really?
But that stigma can hold a lot of people back. And it held me back for a very long time.
Even think about the stigma for therapists, that we all should have it together, that we're always going to have the words, we're always going to be on point, right? So we even struggle with in our culture to say, hey, we're human as well. And we show up for our clients and we get to have this objective point of view because we don't have these feelings that are entwined, right? These emotions. Yet we move into our personal life and we're not therapists anymore. We're people. We are your sisters, your friends, your daughters, all of the above. And so there's a stigma within our culture, right? So culture, so important. And I'm imagining you as well. When I walk into a therapy setting with my therapist, I'm like, I have to walk in and say, take your therapeutic hat off. You're just a person, you're a person today with feelings, and you have big feelings. What are you going to do about them? How are you going to even express to your therapist? You don't have the answers. You don't know how to navigate through this, that you can have vulnerability and say, even though I'm a therapist and I work in this field, I'm so aware of other people, how do I stay in tune with my self-awareness and what that looks like? And I guess I want to kind of wrap this up with another, one of the last questions is, for me, I'm wondering is, how is cultural awareness utilized in the therapeutic session for you? So if someone were to say, hey, I'm digging Reagan, right? I want to go have a session. What would it look like? How do you navigate that in your sessions?
I mean, I certainly, I mean, a lot of the things that like we've touched on, right? Like just employing like a sense of like cultural competence, like the recognition that people are going to come in with different goals. And just because those goals don't necessarily align with something that I value does not mean that it is a maladaptive goal. But then to that end, it's even like what you were speaking to in the beginning is sort of even cultural humility and the recognition that like I might have cultural competence and act and practice in a way that aligns with that, but that doesn't mean that I understand every facet of every culture, and really allowing myself to really, employ that Rogerian, like, positive regard of like, I'm not the expert on your life and I'm not going to pretend to be. I mean,
yes,
that you're ultimately the expert, and that I want to empower you to live in accordance with what you value and not feel like you have to conform to something that I value, or that like, the majority of the culture values. Because I know that plays, especially if you identify as like a minority population, that can be tough to feel like, oh, I need to acculturate and I need to change myself. And we were speaking to that earlier, where it can feel like, am I losing a piece of my culture by like engaging in it's giving people those choices to make for themselves rather than it being reflective of some agenda that I have. Yeah.
I love how you said that. I absolutely, like, that made me feel confident, right? I have to say that when I look for a therapist, I do the stalking. I go to each profile, like,
yes.
I look at last name, like what's your culture? But in actuality, people are doing that to me as well. And something that you said was, I am not going to place my value system on you, right? This is, it's an open arena for discussion, for exploration, for safety. And that I may not come from your culture, whatever that might be, but it doesn't mean that I can't work with you in that setting, because what I'm doing here is, again, not instilling what I believe to be true is healthy for your life, or what I believe what road you should go down. It's me as a therapist harnessing and getting to know you, getting curious, being curious as a therapist. Like, and if I don't know something, I'm going to ask you about it. Yes. Say, you just said something, I've never heard that before. Can you explore that with me? You are educating me on who you are. In turn, you're hearing your own words, and you are, bringing a presence to the therapeutic setting and proclaiming identity. Right? Isn't that kind of why we go to therapy too, to understand our identity, to be able to say, oh, this is who I am. But in my day-to-day life, I maybe don't allow myself that 1 hour a day to really get back into my body, right? We're always here and there in our, depending what culture we come from, how we view it and how we are expressing it. And so it may not be comfortable to express yourself on an intimate, vulnerable level with just any person, or even your closest family members, if it's not something you grew up with. But in your session, you're able to harness these different aspects of who you are to say, there's more to me. There's more to me than what I know and what I was taught. And it's trying to come out. And I just want to understand myself a little better. And what you do with that when you leave the therapeutic setting is up to you, right? That's your right. You're the expert of your life. And I think that culture is one of the biggest influences. And I feel like we as people, as therapists, as clients, is embracing how culture has shaped us into the people that we are, and how we can utilize all that we want from it, but then also add to our culture, right? To add an individualistic layer to say, I'm going to add to my culture. I'm going to add to it so that I can make it my own and feel the best that I can feel, versus saying, this is my culture here, and then I'm a different person here. And so to be able to just harness the full body, right? And now we're going back into holistic, and why I think you and I even chose Sage is that it's a platform for holistic healing, for holistic exploration, however you describe it, whatever words feel good to you, right? To say, I want to be able to tap into all parts of who I am, whether they were culturally influenced, or if it's an idea that I've had inside, or parts of me that I've had inside I want to explore and have other people see, to be able to harness all parts of you and to feel whole again, right? I think culture plays one of the biggest aspects in getting to know yourself on that level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right? God, I couldn't agree more. Just with all pieces of what you're saying.
That's right.
I know, truly. But right, because even if you look at like culture and language, right, that's what we're talking about. Like therapy in large part it's talking, and the way that we talk is very heavily informed by our culture, right? I mean, you can even like in its most like hyperbolic, like ironic ways, right, where people are like, oh, you're from the South, why don't you talk like this? And it informs though, like the way that I understand myself and things. So even just like matching clients' language, and again, like very much allowing them to define things the way that they want to define things.
Sure, absolutely. I think it's all beautiful, right? It happens.
It is.
I would say to our viewers, first of all, thank you for joining us, and thank you for hanging tight. Well, we know we can do this better, and we will get better at it. But if I can leave you all off with one thing, that would just be, if you are wondering a little bit more about yourself, if there's questions you have, if you don't know if therapy is for you or not, or if another modality will work, whatever it is, I mean, please do you, right? Do what's best for you, what feels comfortable for you. But number one is be curious. Be curious as to where you come from, how it's influenced you, where you want to go. And don't judge yourself, right? It's not about judgment. It's about being curious as of what your next step is. What in one place you can start is culture. How has my culture shaped how I view the world? And in this conversation, how has my culture shaped how I perceive mental health? And is it for me? So we will leave off on that, and maybe there'll be more conversations or chats. This is such an amazing topic. There's so many different layers. I don't even know if we can say we scratched the surface. We might have just.
I know. I was just thinking about that. Like, oh my gosh.
Yes. But please leave any comments or reach out if you have any questions. But it was great to chat with you, Reagan. And
chat with you.
We look forward to the next one.
Yes.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for spending some of your time today with us at Sage Holistic Health and Wellness Center. If you like what we're all about, please consider supporting our nonprofit organization by making a tax-deductible donation. To do this, you can go to our website at www.sagewellnessctr.org and click on Donate in the upper right-hand corner. We look forward to spending some time again with you real soon. Take good care.